Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. On a sunny afternoon, 28-year-old Ethan walks into the same cafe he frequents. Nestled in the heart of the city, this cafe always has a rich coffee aroma and a cozy atmosphere. Today, Ethan noticed a strange and beautiful face standing behind the counter. The young woman was about 25 years old with long dark hair and bright brown eyes. Her fingers deftly operated the coffee machine, a gentle smile on her face. Ethan couldn't help but be drawn to her, and his heartbeat involuntarily sped up a few notches. As Ethan walked up to the counter, the woman looked up and asked in a soft voice, "Hello, what can I get for you?" Ethan froze for a moment, then snapped back, "A latte, please." He noticed a name tag on the woman's chest that read Zoe. Zoe smiled and nodded. "Yes, please hold." She skillfully made the coffee while softly asking, "I haven't seen you before. Are you a new customer?" Ethan smiled. "I actually come here a lot, just usually in the evenings. Work ended early today, so I thought I'd grab a coffee." Zoe handed Ethan his coffee. "That's quite a coincidence. I just started working here not long ago, and I usually work the day shift." The two smiled at each other, and Ethan felt a wonderful attraction. He took the coffee and hesitated, but worked up the courage to ask, "What do you do? It doesn't look like a full-time barista." Zoe laughed, a twinkle in her eye. "You guessed it. I'm actually a fashion designer, and this barista job is just part-time. I love working here. I get to meet all kinds of interesting people and get some inspiration." Ethan said in surprise, "Wow, a costume designer. That must be very interesting. What type of clothing do you design?" Zoe enthusiastically explains, "I mainly design clothes for everyday wear, but I also experiment with edgy designs. I want to be able to combine comfort and fashion perfectly." The two just chatted, and Ethan was completely taken with Zoe's talent and charm. He found himself involuntarily wanting to know more about her. From that day on, Ethan began to frequent the cafe. He's always looking for excuses to talk to Zoe, sometimes even letting other customers order first just so he can talk to her a little more. Zoe seemed to enjoy talking to Ethan as well, her eyes sparkling with pleasure every time she saw him coming. And so, 2 months passed. The relationship between Ethan and Zoe grows closer, but Ethan never has the courage to ask Zoe out on a date. He's afraid of ruining this beautiful relationship and worried that Zoe might already have a boyfriend. However, fate always likes to play jokes. One day, when Ethan arrives at the cafe, as usual, Zoe hands him coffee along with a small note. Puzzled, Ethan opened the note, which contained a string of phone numbers and a small line that read, "If you want to know more about me, you can call me." Ethan's heart raced, and he could hardly believe his eyes. He looked up at Zoe, only to see her smile and wink at him before turning to attend to the next customer. That night, Ethan worked up the courage to dial Zoe's number. The call was quickly answered, and Zoe's soft voice came through the receiver. "Hello, Ethan?" "Hi, Zoe." Ethan said a little nervously, "I'm glad you gave me your number." Zoe laughed softly. "I'm glad you called too. Honestly, I've been waiting for this call for a long time." The two chatted in this way, from their respective jobs to their hobbies, from childhood memories to future dreams. Time passed unnoticed, and when Ethan glanced at the clock, he realized that 2 full hours had passed. "Gosh, I can't believe we talked for so long," Ethan said in amazement. Zoe was a little embarrassed too, yet time flies. "I enjoyed talking to you, though." Ethan took a deep breath and worked up the courage to say, "Zoe, I wanted to ask you, would you like to go out to dinner with me? Consider it a formal date." There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment, and Ethan's heart was in his throat. Finally, Zoe's voice came through, "I'd love to, Ethan." The next night, Ethan and Zoe have dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant. Zoe was even more beautiful than usual by candlelight. The two enjoyed their food and continued the unfinished conversation from last night. However, just as dinner was coming to an end, Zoe's expression suddenly became serious. She put down her cutlery, took a deep breath, and said, Ethan, there's something I have to tell you. Ethan sensed the change in atmosphere, and a sudden wave of unease welled up inside him. He forced himself to ask, "What's wrong, Zoe?" Zoe hesitated for a moment, but finally worked up the courage to say, "Ethan, I have a 4-year-old son." The news came as a bolt from the blue, leaving Ethan at a loss for how to react. He stared blankly at Zoe, his mind going blank. Zoe continued, "I know this news may surprise you, or even disappoint you, but I think we should be honest with each other. My son's name is Lucas, and he's a holdover from a relationship I had in college. His father left after I got pregnant and hasn't contacted us since." Ethan took his time digesting the information as he watched the apprehension and anticipation in Zoe's eyes, suddenly realizing how brave the girl was. She raised her children alone while still pursuing her dreams. This courage and strength made Ethan appreciate her even more. However, reason tells Ethan that this is a big decision. He needs time to think, to weigh whether or not he wants to enter into a relationship that carries so much responsibility. Ethan took a deep breath and said slowly, "Zoe, thank you for telling me this. I appreciate your candor. However, I think we may need some time to think about this. Would you be willing to give me some time?" A flicker of disappointment flashed in Zoe's eyes, but she nodded understandingly. "I understand. Ethan, it really is a matter of careful consideration. I will respect whatever decision you end up making." Dinner ended on a slightly heavy note. Ethan gives Zoe a ride home, and the atmosphere is a little awkward as the two say goodbye at the door. "Good night, Zoe," Ethan said softly. "Good night, Ethan," Zoe responded, with a hint of hope and reluctance in her eyes. For the next few days, Ethan was in deep thought. He likes Zoe and admires her talent and courage. But is the responsibility of becoming a father figure to a child too much? Is he ready? Eventually, Ethan decides to be honest about his feelings. He sent Zoe a message asking her to come out and talk. On a park bench, Ethan confessed his thoughts. "Zoe, I like you a lot, I really do. But I'm not sure I'm ready to take on the role of a father to a child. I think we should probably stay friends, at least for now." A flash of disappointment flashed in Zoe's eyes, but she smiled and nodded. "I understand, Ethan. Thank you for your honesty. I value our friendship as well." With that, Ethan and Zoe decided to stay friends. They still see each other regularly, chatting and sharing their respective lives. Ethan even sees Lucas on occasion and develops something of a crush on the smart, sweet little boy. However, the gears of fate have begun to turn. What Ethan doesn't realize is that this decision is just the beginning of their story, not the end. In the days to come, life will bring them more surprises and challenges, as well as a deeper understanding of their feelings for each other. Sunlight poured into the room through a gap in the curtains, and Ethan slowly opened his eyes to Zoe's sleeping side. He gently stroked her cheek, his heart filled with happiness and gratitude. Who would have thought 2 months ago that their relationship would change so dramatically? That day, Ethan and Zoe were talking at the cafe as usual. Zoe is talking about her latest clothing design inspiration, and Ethan listens intently, offering his own insights from time to time. Just then, Zoe suddenly stops and looks Ethan straight in the eye. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, a little puzzled. Zoe didn't answer, just slowly moved closer, then gently kissed Ethan on the lips. The kiss came so suddenly but so naturally. Ethan froze for a second, then responded to the kiss. Ethan's heart was beating fast as the two parted ways. He looked into Zoe's eyes, which glittered with anticipation and a hint of unease. "Zoe, Ethan opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. Zoe took a deep breath and said, "Ethan, I know we agreed before to just be friends. But after all this time together, I realize that I've fallen hopelessly in love with you. I know you're probably still hesitant because of Lucas, but I want to ask you to give us a chance, to give yourself a chance." Ethan was silent for a moment. Over this time, he did develop deeper and deeper feelings for Zoe. He loved every moment with her, her smile, her talent, and even started to like Lucas. However, the responsibility of becoming a father figure to a child still scares him a little. Looking into Zoe's expectant eyes, Ethan made a decision. He took Zoe's hand and whispered, "Zoe, I'm in love with you too. All this time, I've been thinking about our relationship. I admit, I'm still a little scared, but I'm more afraid of losing you. I'm willing to give it a try, and we'll face the challenges ahead together." Tears instantly welled up in Zoe's eyes as she hugged Ethan tightly and whispered in his ear, "Thank you, Ethan. I promise you won't regret it." From that day on, Ethan and Zoe were officially lovers. Their relationship heated up quickly and soon reached the point where they were inseparable. Ethan begins to frequent Zoe's apartment and grows closer to Lucas. Lucas is a bright and active child and quickly accepts Ethan's presence. One day, while Ethan was playing blocks with Lucas, the little guy suddenly looked up and asked, "Uncle Ethan, are you going to be my new daddy?" The question froze Ethan. He looked over at Zoe, who was standing by, who also looked surprised. Ethan squatted down, gently hugged Lucas, and said, "Lucas, I love you and Mommy so much. Although I may not be your real dad, I will love and take care of you like a dad. Is that okay?" Lucas thought about it, then nodded vigorously. "Yeah, I like Uncle Ethan a lot too." In this moment, Ethan felt a warmth and a sense of responsibility that he had never felt before. He looked over at Zoe, who had tears in her eyes and a happy smile on her face. And so it was that Ethan, Zoe, and Lucas formed a cozy little family. However, behind the happiness lie challenges. When Ethan introduces Zoe to his parents, they show their obvious disapproval. "Son, you've only just graduated and your career is just starting out. Are you sure you want to take on such a big responsibility?" Ethan's mother asked worriedly. "And it's not an easy thing to raise someone else's child." The father chimed in. In the face of his parents' skepticism, Ethan said firmly, "I know it's not easy, but I love Zoe and I love Lucas. I believe we can overcome the difficulties and start a happy family." Seeing their son's resolute attitude, the parents said nothing more, although they still had concerns. They decide to meet Zoe and Lucas before making a decision. When Zoe and Lucas arrive at Ethan's parents' house, the atmosphere is a little awkward for a while. But Zoe's kindness and talent, as well as Lucas' cuteness, soon win over the older couple. After dinner, Ethan's mother whispered to him, "Zoe is a good girl and Lucas is cute. Just take your time and don't rush things." Ethan felt relieved to have his parents' approval. His bond with Zoe has grown. 8 months later, a chance encounter changed their lives. Zoe's roommate, Jane, decides to move in with her fiancé, which means Zoe needs to find a new carpool partner. When Zoe mentions this to Ethan, both are silent. Finally, it was Ethan who broke the silence. "Zoe, maybe I could move in with you guys?" Zoe looked at Ethan in surprise. "Are you serious?" Ethan nodded. "I think it's time. We've been together for 8 months now, and I'm getting along with Lucas. And I think it's time to leave my parents' home and start living on my own." Zoe hugged Ethan excitedly. "I'm so happy. But are you sure? This is a big decision." Ethan smiled and said, "I've never been more sure. I love you, Zoe, and I love Lucas. I want to be with you." With that, Ethan moved into Zoe's apartment. At first, adjusting to a new life wasn't easy. Ethan needs to learn how to get along with a child, how to share household chores, and how to find a balance between work and family. But with Zoe by my side, all the difficulties become less daunting. Every morning, Ethan wakes up to the sound of Lucas's laughter. The little guy would run into their bedroom, jump on the bed, and yell, "Uncle Ethan, Mommy, wake up." Ethan would grab Lucas in mock anger and start tickling him. The room soon filled with laughter. Zoe would lean against the doorframe and watch the scene with a happy smile on her face. Breakfast time is the most cozy time of the day. Ethan makes the omelet and bacon while Zoe prepares the salad and juice. Lucas would sit in his little chair and talk excitedly about his dreams or share his new discoveries. Sometimes Ethan and Zoe steal a moment of warmth while Lucas is still sleeping. They would snuggle up on the couch and talk softly, sharing about each other's work and lives. Ethan often marveled at Zoe's talent and creativity, and Zoe always encouraged Ethan to try new things at work. On weekends, they take Lucas to the park for a picnic or to the zoo. Watching Lucas excitedly pointing out various animals, Ethan and Zoe would smile at each other, feeling this simple but precious happiness. In the evenings, when Lucas was asleep, Ethan and Zoe would sit on the balcony, drinking wine and talking. Sometimes they discuss plans for the future. Other times they just snuggle up quietly and enjoy the peace and quiet. However, life doesn't always go smoothly. Sometimes Ethan gets depressed because of work stress. Zoe always sensed his mood changes and would silently make him a cup of hot tea and gently massage his temples. These small gestures always made Ethan feel warm and loved. Sometimes Zoe gets frustrated when her design inspiration runs out. That's when Ethan would take her out for a walk or hug her to let her know that no matter what happened, he would always be there for her. Lucas has his mischievous moments. At one point, he used Zoe's design drawings as a doodle book, drawing crooked lines on several important designs. Zoe almost breaks down when she sees it, but Ethan arrives just in time to calm Zoe while patiently educating Lucas. It's times like these that Ethan has a better understanding of how hard it is to be a parent. But at the same time, he feels the warmth and strength that comes from family. Looking at Zoe and Lucas, he knew he had made the right choice. 5 months of living together has brought Ethan, Zoe, and Lucas closer and closer. They are no longer simply lovers, but true family. Ethan starts to think about whether he should take it a step further, and maybe it's time to think about proposing. However, just as Ethan is about to start planning his proposal, an unexpected event shatters their peaceful life. It was a normal Wednesday night, and Ethan and Zoe were sitting in the living room talking as usual after putting Lucas to bed. Zoe suddenly mentions that one of her coworkers, Jamie, has a crush on Ethan. Jamie said she found you attractive, Zoe said with a smile, and she even hinted that she wouldn't mind becoming friends with you if the opportunity arose. Ethan frowned a little uncomfortably. That kind of joke isn't funny, Zoe. Besides, isn't Jamie married? Zoe's expression suddenly turns a little strange as she whispers, yes, she's married. In fact, her husband Joe has expressed interest in me as well. The news came as a bolt from the blue, leaving Ethan completely frozen. He couldn't believe what he was hearing and didn't understand why Zoe was telling him this. Wait, what? Ethan asked, confused. When did you know all this? Why are you just telling me now? Instead of answering Ethan's question directly, Zoe continued, did you know that Jamie and Joe are actually a couple who have an open relationship? Ethan felt a wave of vertigo as he wondered how he was going to digest this information. He took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. Zoe, why are you telling me this all of a sudden? You're not thinking about. Zoe shook her head hastily. No, I just thought you should know about it. I didn't have any other ideas, really. Despite what Zoe said, Ethan felt a pang of unease. He looked into Zoe's eyes, trying to read something into them, but Zoe's eyes flickered a bit. Zoe, Ethan said seriously, I want you to know that I'm not interested in getting involved in any such thing at all. I love you and you alone. I want our relationship to remain faithful and exclusive forever. Zoe nodded, a small smile on her face. I know, Ethan. I love you too. Only you. Nonetheless, the evening's conversation planted a twinge of doubt in Ethan's mind. He began to think back over the past few months, trying to find if there were any clues he had overlooked before. But no matter what, he can't believe Zoe would betray their relationship. Over the next few weeks, Ethan would occasionally think about that night's conversation. Though his daily life with Zoe remains sweet, that doubt is like a small stone that occasionally sends a ripple through his heart. What Ethan doesn't realize is that this small doubt will revolutionize their lives in the near future. The gears of fate have begun to turn, and they are about to face a great test. Despite Ethan's efforts to suppress his inner turmoil, that doubt took root in his mind like a seed. He begins to unconsciously watch Zoe's every move, trying to pick up clues. However, Zoe doesn't seem to be any different than usual, still being gentle and considerate and loving to Ethan and Lucas. This ambivalent state of mind is exhausting for Ethan. Sometimes, as he watched Zoe and Lucas play happily, he would feel guilty about his suspicions. But immediately afterward, Jamie's or Joe's name would flash through his mind, once again evoking that unnameable uneasiness. Zoe seems to have sensed something unusual about Ethan. One night, When Lucas was already asleep, she gently held Ethan's hand and asked with concern, "Honey, you seem to have something on your mind lately. Is it something difficult at work?" Ethan opened his mouth to confess his misgivings, but ultimately chose to remain silent. He barely managed to squeeze out a smile and said, "It's nothing. Maybe work has been a bit stressful lately." "Don't worry, I'm fine." Zoe gave Ethan a thoughtful look and sighed softly. "Ethan, we agreed to be honest with each other, remember? If something's bothering you, let me know, okay? We'll face it together." Ethan looked into Zoe's sincere eyes and was conflicted. How he wanted to believe in Zoe, to believe that their feelings for each other were pure and genuine. But that doubt was like a thorn in his side, sticking deep inside him and preventing him from fully relaxing. Just then, Zoe's cell phone suddenly lit up. Ethan subconsciously glanced at the screen and saw the name Jamie displayed. Zoe quickly picked up her cell phone and quickly replied to a few messages before putting it down as if nothing had happened. This little episode once again aroused Ethan's suspicions. He forced down his inner turmoil and tried to make his voice sound calm. "Did Jamie want to see you about something?" Zoe laughed and said, "No big deal. She asked to borrow a dress for a party this weekend." Ethan nodded and didn't press the issue any further. But he was keenly aware of a momentary twinkle in Zoe's eyes as she answered. Ethan became increasingly distracted over the next few days. He makes a couple of small mistakes at work, even almost forgetting to pick Lucas up from school once. Zoe shows great concern about this, but Ethan just repeatedly emphasizes that he's fine, just stressed out from work. On Friday night, Ethan's co-workers suggested going to a bar to relax. Normally, Ethan always declined such invitations, preferring to go home to Zoe and Lucas. But this time he ghostly agreed. At the bar, Ethan uncharacteristically had a few more drinks. Alcohol got the better of him, and he began to confide in his co-workers about his troubles. Although he didn't reveal too many details, he did express his concerns about the romance. His co-worker patted him on the shoulder and said, "Dude, if you really care so much, why don't you just talk to her? Maybe everything is just a misunderstanding." Ethan shook his head and laughed bitterly. "I'm afraid of knowing the truth. It's okay if everything is all in my head, but if..." He didn't go on, but the meaning was obvious. Just then, Ethan's cell phone rang. "It's Zoe calling." He hesitated but picked up the phone. "Ethan?" Zoe's voice held obvious concern. "It's late. Why aren't you back yet?" Ethan then realized the time was past midnight. He hastily apologizes to Zoe and says he'll be right back. When Ethan stumbled home, Zoe was sitting in the living room waiting for him. She was both surprised and heartbroken to see Ethan in a drunken stupor. "Ethan, what's gotten into you?" Zoe asked softly, helping him sit down while pouring him a glass of water. "I've never seen you drink like this." Maybe it was the booze that strengthened his courage, or maybe it was the emotions that had been suppressed for too long that finally found a vent. Ethan suddenly looked up straight into Zoe's eyes and asked, "Zoe, do you love me?" Zoe froze for a moment, then replied firmly, "Of course I love it. Why would you ask such a question?" Ethan continued to press. "What about Jamie and Joe? What do they mean to you?" Zoe's face turned instantly pale. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but in the end just lowered her head. Seeing Zoe's reaction, Ethan felt his heart sink. He stood up and stumbled towards the bedroom. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed first." Zoe tries to follow, but Ethan gently closes the door. That night, Ethan lay alone in bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. He knew that their relationship had reached a tipping point. The next morning, Ethan wakes up to find that Zoe has taken Lucas out. A note was left on the table that said, "We need to talk. See you tonight." Ethan was distracted throughout the day. He didn't know what the evening's conversation would bring, but he had a vague feeling that their lives were about to change dramatically. Later that night, after Zoe had settled Lucas, she sat across from Ethan. She took a deep breath and spoke. "Ethan, I know that lately you've been upset about Jamie and Joe. I owe you an explanation." Ethan looked nervously at Zoe, waiting for her next words. Zoe continued, "The truth is Jamie and Joe did make me some suggestions, but I turned them down. I love you, Ethan, and only you. I didn't want to jeopardize our relationship, much less hurt Lucas." Ethan felt a wave of relief, but immediately afterward, a question surfaced in his mind. Then why are you telling me this? Why didn't you just reject them and bury the matter forever? Zoe is silent for a moment, then says softly, Because, because for a moment, I did wonder about their offer. I'm not saying I wanted to accept, just, I don't know, maybe it's because of curiosity, maybe it's because our lives are so bland. But Ethan, please believe me, it was just a moment of confusion. I love you, and I love our family. Ethan felt as if he was on ice after hearing Zoe's words. He stands up and walks over to the window, his back to Zoe. It was a long time before he spoke. Zoe, I need some time. Zoe nodded with tears in her eyes. I understand, Ethan. I will give you time and space. But remember, I love you. That night, Ethan drove out alone, driving aimlessly through the city streets. His mind replayed the moments he had spent with Zoe, thinking about their past, present, and future. When he got home, it was the wee hours of the morning. Zoe was curled up on the couch, asleep with tear tracks on her face. Ethan gently covered her with a blanket and then walked into Lucas' room. Looking at the sleeping Lucas, Ethan felt a pang of heartache. He gently stroked Lucas' hair and made a decision in his mind. The next morning, when Zoe wakes up, she finds Ethan in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Seeing Zoe, he gave a tired but gentle smile. Zoe, Ethan said softly, let's talk. This morning's conversation will determine the course of their relationship. Ethan knows that no matter what the outcome, their lives will change dramatically. But he also understands that only by facing their problems head-on can they find true happiness. Sunlight poured into the kitchen through a gap in the curtains as Ethan and Zoe sat on either side of the dining room table. The atmosphere between them both familiar and unfamiliar. Lucas was still asleep, and the whole apartment was silent, as if waiting for a storm to come. Ethan took a deep breath and broke the silence. Zoe, we need to settle this once and for all. I love you, and I love Lucas, but I can't ignore the doubts in my mind. Zoe bowed her head, her fingers twisting together uneasily. I know, Ethan. I'm sorry for causing you all this trouble. Ethan gazed at Zoe, trying to keep his voice calm. I need to know the whole truth, Zoe. For better or worse, I want to hear it. Zoe looked up with tears glistening in her eyes. Yes, I'll tell you everything. But please believe that no matter what happens, my love for you never changes. She took a deep breath and began to tell. It all started 3 months ago. Jamie approached me on her lunch break that day and said she and Joe had a proposition. Zoe's voice trembled as she remembered everything that had happened that day. Jamie excitedly described to her the benefits of an open relationship and how it could spice up their love life. At first, Zoe is shocked and repulsed, but Jamie's words nevertheless plant a seed of curiosity in her mind. I didn't turn her down right away, Zoe admitted, guilt in her eyes. I told her I needed time to think about it. At that point, our lives were so mundane that I thought maybe it would make some difference. Ethan felt a pang of heartache, but he forced himself to stay calm and keep listening. Zoe continues. Over the next few weeks, Jamie and Joe often approached us with various excuses. They would bump into us or offer to hang out together. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't explicitly stop them. Ethan frowned. So what you told me that night wasn't the whole truth. Zoe nodded as tears began to slide down her face. Yes, I'm sorry, Ethan. I was afraid of losing you. Ethan felt a wave of vertigo as he struggled to control his emotions. What happened then? What happened? Zoe took a deep breath and continued. Until last Friday, the day of Jane's wedding. We'd all had a few drinks, and Jamie and Joe suggested that we all go to their house to keep talking. I agreed. Ethan's heart raced, and he was almost afraid to listen, but he knew he had to face the truth. At their house, the atmosphere became ambiguous. Joe started hitting on me, and Jamie tried to kiss you. Zoe's voice was almost too low to be heard. At that moment, I snapped out of it. I realized what a terrible mistake I was making. I pushed Joe away, stopped Jamie, and immediately left their apartment. Ethan closed his eyes and felt a sharp pang of betrayal and pain. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with sadness and disappointment. Why, Zoe? Why did you do it? Zoe sobbed. I don't know, Ethan. Maybe it's because of curiosity, maybe it's because of the fear of being flat. But I swear, nothing happened that night. I love you and you alone. Ethan stands up and walks over to the window, his back to Zoe. His heart was filled with conflicting emotions: anger, pain, disappointment. But at the same time, there was a hint of relief knowing that things hadn't gone irreparably wrong. I need time, Zoe, Ethan finally said, exhaustion in his voice. I don't know if I can forgive this betrayal. Zoe nods painfully. I understand, Ethan. I'll give you time and space. But remember, I will always love you and Lucas. Just then, the door to Lucas' room opened, and the little boy came out rubbing his sleepy eyes. Seeing the serious expressions on his parents' faces, he asked suspiciously, Daddy, Mommy, what's wrong with you guys? Ethan and Zoe exchanged a look and both forced a smile. Ethan knelt down and gently hugged Lucas. It's okay, baby. We were just talking about some grown-up stuff. Come on, let's go get breakfast ready. Later that afternoon, Ethan tells Zoe he needs some time alone. He packed up some clothes and moved to his brother's house for the time being. As he left, he saw Lucas's confused and sad eyes, and a stab of pain went through his heart. Over the next few days, Ethan fell into a deep state of self-doubt. He looked back over the past few months, trying to figure out if he had ignored any signals. He begins to question whether he really knows Zoe and whether he's really cut out to start a family. Meanwhile, Zoe is in a state of agonizing self-loathing. She thought back countless times to that stupid decision and regretted why she had thought that way. She struggles to take care of Lucas and tries to maintain a normal routine, but her inner torment makes it difficult for her to sleep every night. A week later, Ethan's brother couldn't resist asking, What are you going to do? You can't keep hiding here. Ethan smiled bitterly and shook his head. I don't know. I love Zoe and I love Lucas, but this betrayal, I don't know if I can fully forgive. His brother tapped him on the shoulder. Look, no one is perfect. Zoe made a mistake, but she stopped in time. Maybe you guys need professional counseling to work this out. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps it's time to face the issue. The next day, Ethan sends Zoe a message asking her to meet up and talk. Zoe replied immediately, agreeing to the request to meet. They chose a neutral place, a city park. When Ethan sees Zoe, he's surprised to see how much she's pining away. Zoe has noticeable dark circles under her eyes, and her whole body looks exhausted. Hi, Ethan said softly. Are you okay? Zoe forced a smile. It's okay. Lucas misses you. At the mention of Lucas, Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He realizes that his decision affects not only him and Zoe, but also the innocent Lucas. Zoe, Ethan took a deep breath. I've been thinking about this for the past couple days. I love you, and I love Lucas. But what happened really hurt me and broke my trust in you. Zoe lowered her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I know, Ethan. I'll never forgive myself. If I could do it all over again. Ethan interrupted her. But we can't start over. We can only move forward. Zoe, I want to try to fix our relationship. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take us putting in the work together. Are you willing to do that? Zoe looked up with hope in her eyes. Of course, Ethan. I'd do anything to make up for my mistake. Ethan nodded. Then let's start with couples therapy. We need professional help to rebuild trust. With that, Ethan and Zoe began the long journey of restoration. The weekly therapy sessions helped them understand each other better and also allowed them to confront the problems in their relationship. Meanwhile, Ethan is slowly moving back home. Though he and Zoe haven't fully regained their intimacy, they try to maintain a normal family life for Lucas' sake. After several months of marriage therapy, Ethan and Zoe's relationship improved dramatically. They learned to communicate better, to understand each other, and to rebuild trust. This experience has not only strengthened their bond, but it has also made them appreciate each other and their family even more. One night, when Lucas had gone to sleep, Ethan and Zoe sat on the balcony, enjoying some quiet time together as a duo. The cool evening breeze brushed their faces, and in the distance the lights of the city twinkled like stars. Zoe gently took Ethan's hand and softly said, Honey, there's something I want to talk to you about. Ethan looked at Zoe tenderly, encouraging her to continue. Zoe took a deep breath and said, Jamie contacted me today. She and Joe wanted to invite us to a party, but I think we should decline. Ethan nodded with an understanding smile. I think so too. We've come so far, and life is hard to come by now. I don't want to do anything that might hurt our relationship. Zoe's eyes glistened with tears of gratitude and love. Thank you, Ethan. I feel the same way. Our family, our relationship, means more to me than anything. I don't want to take any chances. Ethan gently took Zoe into his arms and dropped a tender kiss on her forehead. I love you, Zoe. We've been through so much together, and now I'm more sure than ever that you're the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. Zoe snuggled into Ethan's arms and said happily, I love you too, Ethan. Thank you for always being there for me, supporting me, and understanding me. This home we've created together is my most precious treasure. Just then they heard a slight rattle coming from Lucas' room. Smiling at each other, the two of them got up to check it out. They gently pushed open the door to Lucas' room to find the little guy smiling in his sleep. Ethan and Zoe stood in the doorway, looking at their son with happiness and fulfillment in their hearts. Ethan put his arm around Zoe's shoulders and whispered, Look at the miracle we made. We're really lucky, aren't we? Zoe leaned on Ethan's shoulder and softly replied, Yes, we're lucky, but more importantly, we know how to appreciate it. From that day on, Ethan and Zoe's relationship became stronger. Together, they decided to devote more time and energy to their family. Every weekend, they take Lucas to the park for a picnic or do fun family activities together. They have also started a new tradition of having monthly family meetings where everyone can talk and share their thoughts and feelings. Not only did this make their communication smoother, but it also made Lucas feel valued and listened to. Over time, Ethan and Zoe find that their love not only doesn't wane with the humdrum of everyday life, but deepens with each challenge and problem they face together. They learn to appreciate each other's strengths, tolerate each other's weaknesses, and find happiness in the little things in life. Sometimes, when they think back to the difficult times of the past, they are overwhelmed with emotion. That experience, as painful as it was, made them appreciate what they have now even more. Years later, when Lucas is all grown up and ready to leave home for college, Ethan and Zoe stand in front of their home, watching their son's faraway back. Ethan put his arm around Zoe's waist and whispered, We did it, honey. We raised a wonderful child and built a happy family together. Zoe leaned on Ethan's shoulder and said happily, Yes, we did. And this is just the beginning of our story. There are so many more exciting chapters to come for us to write. They smiled at each other, interlocked their fingers, and walked back to their loving and warm home. Despite the challenges that life will still bring, they know that no difficulty is insurmountable as long as they love and support each other. This is Ethan and Zoe's story, a story of love, growth, perseverance, and happiness. Their experience tells us that true love is not the absence of difficulties, but the willingness to face every difficulty together and grow in the process, ultimately reaping happiness that is better than imagined. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.